innovation is something that is on the top of people's minds. They want to grow businesses. They want you to come up with really great and fantastic ideas. According to the research, as you see up here, it shows that 92% of people recognize that innovation, it leads to success in organizations. So you can see that's a really big number. But here's the problem. Less than 10% of people actually think strategically. So why is it so difficult to do that? In fact, there's only about 4.7% of leaders that are considered strategic thinkers. So that's a very small number. So if you want people to think innovation, you want them to lead massive projects and great initiatives, but it's also a very difficult thing to do. So why is it so hard? That wasn't a rhetorical question. That was actually waiting for you guys to interact with me there. So why do you think strategic thinking is so difficult? Yes?
Knowing how to do it.
Yeah, they don't know how to do it. Why else is strategic thinking hard?
Companies are process-driven.
Companies are very process-driven, yes.
We're not given all the information up front.
No, exactly. We don't get all the information up front, so it makes it a bit hard for us to think strategically when we're only given about this much information. And yet you still want us to come up with these fantastic ideas that are going to be groundbreaking. Yes?
You have to project forward into the unknown.
Forward into the unknown, yes. And that's a scary place because we don't know what that unknown necessarily looks like. So now we got to combine all of these different elements and aspects that we were just discussing here and come up with a plan that's going to change the direction in which we're moving at. So this is really the essence of what we're going to be talking about when I say strategic thinking and leading innovations. So lifesavers. How many of you guys have heard of lifesavers before? Yeah, most of us have, right? It's a delightful candy. Often, most times we've got that when we went trick-or-treating. We got that in our little bags. Or sometimes you'll go over to maybe your grandparents' house and they might have snuck you the peppermint candies. So let me tell you about the story about lifesavers. So Clarence Crane, he used to own a chocolate company back in 1912. And he used to sell chocolates, but it was sort of going down in sales, especially in the summer months. And as you could imagine, what happens to chocolate in the summer when it's really warm? Right, it starts to melt. So his sales weren't that great. So he was thinking, you know what, I need to come up with a great idea, something that's a bit different. I'd like to sell perhaps mints. They were hard candies. And I'd like to offer those in the summer months when my sales are actually lower. At that time, people would get their mints usually from Europe, and they'd come in a square sort of object looking, and instead what he wanted to do was be different. So he thought, you know, maybe I could have another shape. Not really sure what would this look like. So what he did one day is he was going to the drugstore to get some flavoring. And what he noticed was the pharmacist was punching pills, and he was making them into flat, round pills. And he thought, hey, that's a great idea. What if I made my mints round? So he got that punching machine and he started punching mints. But what happened was, whoops, I punched a hole in the mint. What am I going to do with this? At that time, they used to have lifesavers that they were having on ships, and the lifesavers were round with the hole in the middle. So he said, okay, I'm going to use this as my idea, and he decided to launch Crane's Peppermint Lifesavers. So he started selling those, and it caught on, and people really liked it. They thought, oh, this is so cute, it's got a little hole in the middle. Which actually I think was a mistake, but it worked to his advantage. And it turned out to be a life-saving innovation for his business. Then in 1913, he turned around and sold the patent to Clarence Noble, and then Noble turned around and made like millions of dollars later. He actually sold the patent for $2,900, which he's probably regretting, because that went on to, Noble turned around and he ended up making so much more money. Sorry, not Clarence, Edward Noble turned around making millions with different colors, different flavors, different textures. And as we all know, Lifesavers has now expanded beyond just the mint to now all the different flavors that you can get in the Lifesaver rainbow. So you can see sometimes you can come up with an innovation just by happenstance. It's just a mistake, but it's how you use that and think strategically where you can take things to a whole new level and end up saving your company. So what are we going to talk about today? We're actually going to be looking at what is strategic thinking and what are all the different types of thinking that go along with that. So as you're thinking strategically, we're encompassing things like systems thinking and innovative thinking, entrepreneurial thinking, as well as critical thinking. And then we're going to take a look at how do we strategically identify what are the best practices that we want to use and the tools that we can embrace so that we can lead our teams through innovation. And then lastly, you know what, when you come up with a really great idea, is it always embraced by everybody? Not always. So then you deal with resistance. So how do we recognize what are some of those signs of resistance, and then how are we going to manage that? Okay? So I saw this sign a couple of days ago, and I saw it's like creative people must be stopped. And I thought to myself, that's really interesting, kind of strange. And most of you are probably thinking the same thing. That doesn't make any sense. Why would you want to stop a creative person? Creative people are beloved. We like them. We want to encourage people to think out of the box and to come up with these wild ideas that we can build off. So I'm going to ask you to play along with me, okay? Can you get everybody to agree? You're going to play along no matter what I say? You got to trust me. Okay, so I want you right now to think of an animal, any animal that comes to mind. You got that animal in your head? Okay, so I want you to stand up. Face the person next to you. And on the count of 3, I want you to make that sound of that animal, okay? On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3, go. Okay? I want you to make that noise louder, like you really mean it. On a count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Make that noise loud as you can. All right. Take it, sit down, sit down. Okay, so as you were making those animal noises, was that kind of fun? Did you have a little fun doing that? I heard some laughter going on there. That wasn't too bad. Okay, so we had some fun with that. Now, as a challenge, why don't we all just go outside, we'll go find a whole bunch of people and just start making animal noises at them. Some of you are like, what? I didn't agree to that part there, right? You're like, oh no, I'm not gonna go outside and make some animal noises at some random people. That seems crazy. Yeah, and you know what? As innovators and people who come up with really great ideas, when you're asked to share those ideas, sometimes the things that get in the way is yourself. And you also have to think about, I need to understand how is it that I'm supposed to overcome those barriers? How do I deal with those resistance? How do I strategically overcome those challenges that might get in the way of me thinking strategically and leading those really wild and crazy ideas? That's what we're here to talk about. So there's 6 barriers to innovation. And David Owens came up with this, and he talks about the complexity that goes into launching a new innovative idea and how we were faced with multiple different challenges. As you can see here, the individual, that's you, sometimes you're the one that gets in the way of leading your own really fantastic ideas and thinking strategically. Then you've got groups of people. Those are your friends. Those are your coworkers, because they might look at you and say, it's not such a really great idea. I don't know if we should do this. You've got the organization that's got structures and policies and procedures that may not necessarily support that idea. You've also got the industry and the marketplace. When you try to test it out to see if they like it, some will gravitate, some might not. You've got social, which looks at social media, social groups, and society as a whole, and how might they interpret what it is that you're talking about, or how you're now thinking a little bit differently. And then you've got technology and the uses of that might not be able to support what it is that you want right now. So when you look at those barriers, you really want to think about how can we overcome these barriers. But even just a step beyond that, it's really figuring out what is that sweet spot where some of those barriers overlap, that we can sort of just cherry pick and figure out that's a space we need to play in to make us a bit different when we decide that we want to think differently and we want to think strategically and lead with innovation. How many of you guys have had a Blockbuster membership? Yeah, I think pretty much all of us had. So back in the 1990s, we had the Blockbuster membership. Like, that was the thing to have. It was coveted. And for those of you who were dating back in the 1990s, you also know that that was what you did on a date. You'd go to Blockbuster, you'd walk up and down the aisles with your sweetheart, and you're looking at the movies. What should we get? Maybe we'll get a romance movie. Maybe we'll get a comedy. And he'd usually say, I want action. I want, shoot 'em up kind of thing. That's what, and you're like, what about like a some? I think that might be great for a date. And so that's what we did, right? We rented our VHS. Some of us had a beta machine, right? If those of you can remember what that was. And we'd go home, we'd watch this. And you could even get popcorn, you get snacks. I think they even sold Haagen-Dazs in the Blockbuster back then. And that was a date night. And then, what did they start doing after a while? They started charging these exorbitant fees for bringing back your rentals late. And then they even had the commercials, no more late fees, if you remember those, because they were astronomical. They actually charged you more for late fees than loan sharks were charging you. So this was just totally ridiculous. But Netflix saw this as an opportunity. So they basically said, you know what, it's time for us to make a move. Since then, they have totally revolutionized the way in which people watch TV and the way that they watch movies. They've now created it so that you will stream your TV watching so much differently, the way that you watch movies. Instead of going to the movie theater, now you'll consider bringing the movie theater to your own home. Netflix really has changed the way that we look at the whole DVD renting system. So let's talk about how they use strategic thinking to basically dominate and put Blockbuster out of business. What they decided to do was create a subscriber base, which before it wasn't something that people used to do. Think about it. I'm going to pay a fee so that I can rent or watch shows on TV. Maybe I will watch them, maybe I won't watch them. I'm not sure if I'm onto this. So this is something they thought, we're going to launch it, but we'll launch it at a price that's not too bad. And now you realize that it's way cheaper than getting cable. So most people now have decided they're not even going to bother getting cable. They just get Netflix because they can watch a lot of the shows on it. So since 2011, they have amassed well over 20 million subscribers, just alone from that strategic thinking of having a subscriber base. They have now such a leader in the industry that they're about number 2, just behind Comcast. So you can see that they are beating out even Sony. We've got Best Buy and Amazon and even Apple. They're really where you go to watch movies in the comfort of your own home. To leverage the use of technology, which is one of the barriers, they have now included the access to Netflix on the smart TVs, through Xbox, your PlayStation. So they've used a whole bunch of other gaming devices so that you can continue to enjoy Netflix and you can see it being streamed through multiple different ways. They've also allowed you to have it on multiple devices. So you have a Netflix membership, you can watch it from multiple different devices, which makes it nice and easy. I can watch it on my phone, I can watch it on my laptop, my TV, and I can stream it through my video consoles if I wish. What they've essentially done is that they've taken over even primetime. So between 8 and 10, most people are at home watching Netflix. That's about 20% is the amount of people who are actually streaming Netflix movies and shows. That has actually surpassed even Apple, which was about, I think it's 2%. And even just Google, if you want to go on and just stream something on YouTube, and that was at just under 10%. So you can see how they're steadily growing, and that's only going to get bigger. In 2008, what they did is they went to Starz, and Starz basically sold them 2,500 pieces of entertainment content for $30 million at that time, which would, in today's age, would be about $250 million. So that's a lot of content that they have. They tried to approach HBO, and HBO was refusing to sell them any streaming rights. And then their next biggest competitor, which is Showtime, they're not making as much shows as they used to. So what Netflix has done is they've capitalized on that, and they now bring you Netflix original series, right? So, and I know most of you guys have seen that and have enjoyed their series. They also watch your viewing patterns so that they can create movies based on what you watch. They give you top picks based on what you watch. And so they're really now trying to hone in on what is it that the end user wants. And that's really what thinking strategically is about, is coming up with that competitive advantage so that you can outnumber your competition. So back in 2000, they approached Blockbuster and said, "Hey, do you guys want to buy us? You know, we're up and coming company. We'll sell it to you for $50 million." Blockbuster, like, get out of here. We don't need you. We're good. Now, as you guys all know, 2010, they basically went bankrupt because Netflix continued to think innovation and strategy and outperformed them. So what does all this mean? So at the end of the day, we need to think strategically so that we can move things forward and that we can outperform our competition. But what is strategic thinking? What does that mean to you? So you think of the term strategic thinking, what are the words that come to your mind? Proactive, yes. What else does strategic thinking mean to you? Planning, yep. What else? Yes? Big picture, of course. Anyone else? Nobody knows how to think strategically? Is that what you're telling me? I don't think that to be true. Otherwise, you guys wouldn't have a job at all, right? I know you guys know how to think strategically. So let's talk about what does that actually mean. Strategic thinking is a dynamic process, and it's focused on exploring, analyzing, and creating future opportunities that are going to add value so that you're able to attain that vision of success. It's going to help you get to that next level, but there's a couple of things that are involved in making that happen. It requires you to not think conventionally, but to think, again, strategically. And as some of you have already mentioned, strategic thinking is about that future forward thinking. It's looking beyond. It's about being curious and not just being okay with status quo. It's really about being able to think innovatively and to continuously look to learn more, as opposed to the conventional thinker that's always being proactive. They're always satisfied with where things are. They're very predictable. I don't need to think long term. I just need to get through today. That's your conventional thinkers. Your strategic thinkers are the ones that are always thinking about the possibilities of the future and what that can bring to them. So what encompasses strategic thinking? Strategic thinking is really about 4 different types of thinking, as you can see here. One of the best companies that really encompasses what strategic thinking would be the tech powerhouse Google. So Google really thinks strategically and innovatively. So they've figured out a way how to mesh those 2 things together. So they have a plan which they talk about as lifestyle strategy. And what they do is they sell their employees as well as potential employees on the idea that you can work and have fun. If you go to Google, you'll see that they encourage things like having slides that lead you to the cafeteria. They let you come to work and bring your dogs to work. They have all-you-can-eat buffets. They will have these really quirky chairs like bean bags and boats and ski gondolas. And they encourage people to not only work, but to have fun in their work environments as well. They let all of their engineers, and they've also extended that to all of their employees, to take time to have a pet project. And by having a pet project, something that you're passionate about, something that you care about, you'll be working on that in addition to doing your work. So they actually give you time at work to work on your pet project. That way they're able to harness that positive energy, and they encourage strategic thinking. So you come up with these really innovative ideas. Google is all about the possibilities that we could achieve, not about what was done in the past and what worked. It's what can we do in the future. And that's enabled them to get their employees to continuously think strategically and to harness that innovative thinking. So when we look at strategic thinking, it's got to include multiple different facets. Of course, the innovative thinking. It's got systems thinking, critical thinking, and entrepreneurial thinking. So how do those 4 different types of thinking styles all sort of play together? So we're going to talk about each of those individually. So the first one is systems thinking. How many of you have heard of systems thinking prior to today? Maybe 1 or 2 of you. So systems thinking, I was told about this, I would say about 7 or 8 years ago from one of my managers. And she said, you know, Siobhan, I need you to think systems thinking. And I just looked at her, I'm like, okay, sure. And of course, what do? I leave there, and where do you go when you don't know what something is? What do? You Google it. So I go onto Google, and I'm typing in systems thinking, and I'm like, okay, systematic thinking. And then I see some stuff on reinforcement loops, and I'm like, what is all of this? What does this mean? I don't get it. And so I had to do some exploring. Of course, I stumbled across the book called The 5th Discipline, which is written by Peter Senge. Brilliant man. And he talks about systems thinking. He's really like the guru on systems thinking. That book is about 500 plus pages, and you might need a thesaurus as you're reading it because he uses a lot of big words. But to synthesize what he's talked about in 500 pages, I'm going to attempt to do this in like 1 diagram. So if you are thinking in terms of systems, you've got your organization here. And the organization has got multiple different areas. So give me some areas that are in your organization. Sales. Okay. Marketing. What else? Thank you. Finance. And what else? Like production? I think we're missing a big one in there. Like maybe your IT, they do some stuff in the background there. Just saying, they always get forgotten, but you know that you got to call them for something. All right, so you got so marketing, because they're brilliant individuals. They always come up with these really great ideas. Hey, let's launch a new product. We're going to put this online so that people can just come running in droves to buy it. So we think that we're going to work on this and we're going to do this in isolation. Does it really end up being in isolation? No, because they come up with an idea, but they got to work with sales in order to sell the product that they want to get off the ground. If they want to put anything online to reach multiple consumers, they also have to involve IT. And then they might have to hire some new staff to actually get some stuff done. So let's go have a conversation with HR. As soon as we start getting revenue that's coming in, finance has to be introduced in there, and they got to do like audits and whatnot. And to get it distributed to the actual to the customer, production's got to be involved. So you can see one idea that marketing comes up with isn't just their idea in isolation. There are some interdependent relationships. So systems thinking is really about understanding the impact of those interrelationships. So everything that you're working on, any idea that you have, any project or initiative that you want to move forward, you got to think about how is this going to impact other departments? Who do I need to involve? Who should I be talking to? Who else might be impacted by this? So that your decisions and your planning aren't made in isolation, but are rather with other departments, so that way you have a collaborative approach. So when you talk about systems thinking, it's really understanding the whole system. That's everything. And you have to define what your system is. Is it just going to be Maple Leaf, or is it going to be the food industry as a whole? You got to define what you say is your system to be. And then you got to take a look at what are the interconnected relationships. Who else might be impacted by this decision, so that nothing is made in isolation, and understand that there's always ripple effects to each decision that is being made. So that's systems thinking. And so for me, when I understood that concept, it totally blew my mind, because it's like, oh yeah, that totally makes sense. I get it. I can't be making all these decisions by myself. But I didn't actually stop to think of the full implications that that would have on the system or the organization or the entire industry as a whole. So I throw that out for you to keep that in the back of your mind, especially when you're going through your planning stages, who needs to be involved in that. The next one is innovative thinking. And I think most of us know what innovation really is. It's where we're looking at creating new or different process or a new result. So when you think about that, sometimes these are done, when you come up with an innovation, it's done on purpose, it's very strategic, you plan for it, and other times it just sort of happenstance, like with the lifesaver we were talking about, punching a hole in the middle of a candy. 3M was another one of those organizations that came up with innovative ideas. Does anyone know what 3M stands for? It's like the Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing. Now we just know them as 3M. But what they were doing is they were trying to come up with an adhesive to go with their Scotch tape products. So they were working on this with their researchers and their innovators, and they came up with this product that didn't quite conform to the requirements and the specifications that they were looking for, because it just wasn't sticking right. So Art Fry, who worked for them, and he was part of their research team, he actually was looking for an adhesive that wasn't going to come off completely or stick completely, because he had a songbook, and he wanted a bookmark that would stick, but he could take it off and put it into a next page. So what he decided to do was apply that usage to this adhesive that wasn't sticking 100%, and there we get Post-it notes. And from Post-it notes, they have now used those to come up with labels, and then the flip charts with the Post-it notes and other adhesive material. So you could see how just one idea that you thought was that wasn't quite exactly what you were looking for, you had a purpose but didn't quite fit, was able to be expanded into a much better idea that you could now use for multiple uses. And that is actually one of their life-saving ideas, because that organization actually was tanking until they came up with the Post-it notes. Then we've got the 4 C's of innovation in terms of what actually is innovation and what brings that together. And another organization that's really innovative that comes to mind is Disney, of course, right? Disney is all about innovation, and they really encompass the 4 C's of innovation, which looks at first having the curiosity. You always need to have a curious nature. You're always looking and searching for new answers, seeking out new things, and you have to have that curious spirit about you that always wants to know more, learn more, and that's going to drive you to search out more things. The next one is creativity. And creativity goes beyond just innovation. It's really about trying new things, new ideas, things that people can only dream of in their minds. And as you already know with Disney, they're consistently creative and always coming up with really fun and great ideas. They're not just an organization that comes up with really cute cartoons. They're so much more than that. They actually go beyond that and have the courage to stand up behind their ideas and still push them forward. And if you've seen the movie WALL-E, so you'll know in the first couple, I think like first 10 or 15 minutes of that movie, it's no talking. It's just a robot moving around and doing some stuff. Someone had an idea and thought, hey, why don't we do this? But they had to have the courage to keep pushing it forward. And that's how you get stuff done. It's taking that courage to say, stand by your idea, and it can be wildly successful, given the right people who will buy into it, of course. And then the last one is collaboration. So collaboration means that you don't do this all in isolation. It's not just for you to come up with an idea and push your agenda forward. It's really to work with the right people so that you can change the direction of the organization. So it goes back to, it's linking that back to the systems thinking again. It's working with others to make your vision actually happen. So now that you've got the 4 C's, you can see how Disney really encompasses the 4 C's of innovation. They're the ones that went to Florida and they saw some swampland and didn't just see a big muddy pool. What they saw was coming up with a great amusement park that was going to really capture the hearts of many people. They saw the impossible. Where people had conventionally thought, you know what, you'll just have a theme park, maybe have some rides and things that are fun. What they saw was something that was far beyond that. It was encompassing the uses of technology, of education, of people and innovation, and they came up with this amusement park that defied all of the contemporary standards of what an amusement park is supposed to look like. And Walt Disney himself was saying, you know what, he loves creating the impossible. And so that's another seed that I want to plant with you. Think about creating the impossible and making that possible. So let's think innovatively for a second here. Imagine how many different ways could you jump 50 feet into the air, but you're not being constrained by cost, time, or even physics at this point. How could we make that happen? So I throw that to you. So you're going to think a little bit crazy and outside of the box. How can we make that happen? Some fancy shoes, so you said? Bouncy shoes. All right, so we've got bouncy shoes. What else? Trampoline.
Rocket.
Yes, a rocket. What else can we do to bounce 50 feet up into the air?
Giant spring.
Giant spring.
How about a giant to pull you up?
Go to the moon.
Hey, there's no bad ideas. Giant slingshot. See, we came up with a couple ideas in just less than a minute, and that's because we weren't thinking about, you know, that's a bad idea or we're not. What we did was started building off of some ideas that were said before. And that's really what creative thinking is all about. It's about thinking past what is possible and into the impossible stage. And this is what we've done here. We do brainstorming all the time. And then sometimes what do we end up doing while we're doing the brainstorming? Because I heard some chuckling when somebody had mentioned one of those ideas around the canon. We put our critical hats on, right? And we start criticizing, like, well, I can't really do that. And that's one of those things that we have to try to avoid doing. Why do you think it's important for us not to go into critical thinking mode before we finish the innovative thinking?
You might not get to the best idea.
Exactly. You might not get there because you're killing the ideas before you could even get to that point. So it's so important for us to go through the innovative thinking portion and then move over to the critical thinking aspect. So for us to be able to do that, we have to hold off on the critical thinking. So once we've come up with all the great ideas, all the great options and alternatives, that's when we can switch over to critical thinking. Now is where we're going to be analyzing, and we're going to also check our assumptions too. Oftentimes when we go into situations, we already have a set of assumptions that are in our head. We call those mental models. And those are the things that prevent us from actually objectively looking at a situation. So you have to think objectively, and then you analyze and evaluate what are the possibilities, what are the potential options that I have available to me, as well as what is the impact if I decide to go with this alternative. That's what critical thinking really is about. One of the inventors of critical thinking, and another tool that I want to share with you, is Porter's force field analysis. Anyone ever heard of that tool before? Great, so I see a few of you have. So basically what you're doing is you're drawing a line in the middle of your page, and you're going to think about what are all of the things that are going to help me reach my goal. And then on the other side is what are all the things that are going to hinder me reaching my goal. And then you're going to amplify all the things that are going to help. You're going to come up with a plan to work through all of those things, and then and all the things that are going to hinder you. Perhaps it could be communication, it could be not support, maybe you're not getting enough money, whatever that is, then you're going to come up with a plan to mitigate those. So that's your mitigation strategy. And by doing that, you're able to get closer to your goal because you're also doing a little bit of risk analysis in there too. And that's what we talk with the Porter's forces. It's really around amplifying all of the things that are going to drive your idea forward and reducing all of the things that are hindering your idea or your goal from coming to fruition. So I'm going to leave that with you as another tool for you to consider after you've left here when you're thinking strategically in terms of how can I make this work or how can I make it happen. The last one that we have here is entrepreneurial thinking. So we think about entrepreneurial thinking, and entrepreneurial thinking is really about thinking differently, to anticipate what changes while seeking opportunities in order to create a competitive advantage. So who thinks entrepreneurially? First name that comes to mind, good for me, Steve Jobs. He really encompassed what entrepreneurial thinking was. He went beyond just the status quo. He was always about coming up with ideas for the end user in mind. At the end of the day, it wasn't about coming up with just fancy looking and sleek looking products that were aesthetically pleasing. It was more around what is it that the end user wants? How can I make a product that is far superior than what the competition is driving? Sometimes people think in the mindset of, hey, the competition is offering this product over here, so let's think about how we can offer a product that's similar but just offer it better. And what Steve Jobs tried to impart on his people were, don't think about how we can make it better, think about how can we do it differently. How can we do it more uniquely so that we can maintain that competitive advantage? And so that all of the aspects of the product that you're offering is really an extension of what the user wants. And you're offering them something that they didn't even know that they wanted, but it just seems like a natural progression. And that product should be superior than your competition. So that's really what thinking entrepreneurially is like. It's around thinking differently so that you can get that unique competitive advantage. He went on and used that principle to come up with a bunch of Apple products, as we know. So you've got your iPhone and your iPad, the iPod Touch, the iPod Shuffle, you've got the MacBook Pros, you've even got the little iWatch. And he's continued with that philosophy, and as they keep building more and more innovative products, it's all around who is the end user, what do they want, and how can we make this meet their needs and far surpass what it is they even think that they know that they want. That's what thinking strategically is really about. The problem is, though, when we come up with these really great ideas and we try to launch it and we try to tell people about it, they don't always react the way that we want them to. The reality is that you're going to get some people who are going to be supportive of you, and then you're going to get a bunch of people who are kind of, I'm not really sure how I should feel, and then you got a small other bunch that are totally not in accordance and alignment with what it is that you want. So how do you manage all of those things? And what's the distribution curve actually looking like? Any of you guys remember when you were back in school, how you got those professors that used to tell you, some of you are going to pass my class, you'll get straight A's, some of you are going to fail, and then the rest of you will just lump up and get a bunch of C's in between. I had that teacher, I didn't really like him. But he's right in terms of the distribution curve. The reality is you're going to have about 16% right off the bat that are going to be your supporters. They're going to advocate what it is that you're trying to show them, and they're going to say that this is a fantastic idea, I want to run with it, and I'm going to be there right with you. I'm going to champion that idea. Then on the flip side, you're going to get 16% of the people who are going to think this idea sucks, what were you smoking, this is really awful, and I'm not with you. As a matter of fact, I'm going to be advocating against you to show people all the holes that are in your idea. And then you've got that bulk that's in the middle, there's about 68%, and they're kind of on the fence going, prove that this is a good idea to me, because I'm not 100% sure right now. I'm just on the line. So as someone who's trying to propel an idea and pitch it to people so that they think that this is something I want to jump on board with, where should you spend the bulk of your time? Do you spend it with your supporters? Do you spend it with your neutral people? Or do you spend it with your resistors? Where should we spend the bulk of our time? Neutral, you say. Okay, how many people agree with him? How many people think it should be the supporters? And how many people think it should be the resistors? Okay, so we still got a bit of a distribution curve even in the responses there. So let's start off then with the supporters. So if we decide that we want to spend the time with the supporters, it's a good strategy in terms of those people they're on board, we want to keep them happy, so we want to spend the time with them. The thing is, they're already on board, so spending the bulk of your time with them isn't necessary because they're already with you to begin with. And then you've got on the flip side, if you are with your resistors, there's usually the ones that are real pain. Yes or yes? Yeah, they are the ones that are a pain. So those are the ones that because they make the most amount of noise, you have to tend to give them the most amount of attention. But should you be giving them all of your attention? I'm going to say maybe, because depending on who they are and if they're highly influential, you might need to spend some more time there too. But should you spend the bulk of your time there? No. The bulk of your time actually should be spent with your neutrals to help them understand what is it that I'm proposing here. This is a really great idea. Why am I proposing this to you? How will this impact the way that you do your job? Who else needs to be involved in this? So you're going to be helping them as they go through that process so that they can understand why this is a good idea that they need to be jumping on. Now, I'm not saying don't deal with the resistors because, as you know, they can actually be a real pain. And sometimes being able to identify what makes a resistor is actually kind of difficult. So some of you might recognize him, Mr. Angry. And so the common signs, those are the ones that are easy to see. Those are the finger pointing, the blaming, I'm not 100% on board, this doesn't appeal to me, and they'll overtly try to sabotage your mission. But then you've got on the flip side some of these passive resistance things. These are the signs that you don't necessarily see, but they're still subtly resisting your ideas. They're the ones who are agreeing, saying, yeah, that's a really great idea, but they're not doing anything to help you. Those are the ones that said, what? You said something? There was an idea you came up with? Was I supposed to do something about that? Oh, I don't remember. Feigning ignorance. Those are extremely frustrating players. You've got those that just withhold information and suggestions because they secretly want you to fail. So they don't help you along the way. So those are things that you also need to be paying attention to, and you got to come up with, well, how can I overcome that? How do I look past my friends and my team members or the organization as they are pushing and resisting against this idea that I fundamentally believe is a fantastic idea that can help the organization? Well, this is where you got to start explaining the need. Why do we need to do this? What's happening right now that's forcing us that we need to change the way that we're thinking? You'll need to provide them with information so that they can understand the bigger context, the broader picture as to where we're at and why this is happening. We also need to consult with people because you can't do this in isolation. You can't just run all by yourself. You got to collaborate and have them working with you as a team. You'll have to provide them with training so that they know and understand what the new idea is and how it's supposed to look. You're going to build trust and build a sense of security. And the only way that you do that is through your demeanor and through who you are as a person and the values that you stand for. So people need to understand that those are also in alignment. And when you're working with individuals, you need to assess, are they ready for this? Because sometimes you'll come up with a great idea that could be so future forward that they're not ready to accept it yet. So in those cases, you have to back it up a little bit and just give it to them in like bite sizes. When they launched the iPad or the iPod, not everybody was necessarily ready for that, but they had to do it into small, manageable chunks. I don't think they would have been able to launch the iPad if they hadn't launched the iPod first. So it got people more ready. And now as they come up with the iPhone and all the new features of the iPhone, each time, each iteration gets better and better, and they keep pushing that envelope so that we start to expect more and more and greater things. So similarly, when you assess the readiness of your group or your team to launch an idea, you got to make sure, are they even ready for this? Or maybe I need to stage it into approach to get them to be ready. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay. At the end of the day, what we want you to do is to think differently and to be the ones that have the courage to come up with those crazy ideas. Just like Steve Jobs was saying here, you know, you have to be crazy enough to be able to change the world, and you have to be the ones who are ready to do that. So I encourage you and implore you to think a little bit differently and to not get stuck in that box of where you're supposed to be, but rather to look for future possibilities. When you're thinking strategically, there's a couple of questions that you might want to ask yourself. So I'm going to leave these for you, where you're going to be looking at, what is the problem that I'm actually trying to solve here? What is it that who am I trying to solve the problem for? Because that's going to give you a tip in terms of what's the end user, what are they looking for, what are the features that you might want to build in so that it's going to enhance, so that this is something that they're going to view as better than the competitor. You want to look at, what will it look like if I succeed? What is the vision? What's the end result supposed to look like? What is my personal vision that I want to see as the final outcome? What results do I want? And who are the people to work with me? Who are the right team of individuals that are going to help me move my direction forward? And then lastly, are there other organizational systems, processes, procedures, structures that need to be in alignment with this? Because if not, I can come up with the best ideas, but it's not going to stick. It's going to just fall because you don't have the systems to support that. And they also need to be in alignment. So at the end of the day, it all kind of boils down to thinking differently. So I'm going to show you a video. It's like 2 minutes. And this one was released by, it's sort of the unreleased version by Apple. Some of you may have seen it already, but it's all around thinking differently and having the courage to think innovation.
Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules, and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify or vilify them. About the only thing you can't do is ignore them, because they change things. They push the human race forward. While some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius. Because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do.
Another great video. So you can see all of those leaders who went out there, who thought differently, who had a great vision and decided to keep at it. They had the tenacity and the drive to not take no for an answer. So I encourage all of you to think differently, to challenge the status quo, to think about challenges and opportunities as a means to thinking outside of the box, to really redefine what a problem is and to think about it from a strategic point of view. And so that when you go out there and you're challenged to do something differently, to think differently, that you don't allow those animal noises that you were making earlier to hold you back, that you silence that monkey chatter, is what I call it, in your minds, and to allow the lions that are inside of you to roar loudly and to let people know that you've got a great idea and you just want to be heard and you want to work together to make that happen. And that's how you actually think strategically and move innovation forward. You also have to know that those ideas, the small ideas, even as small as you might think that they are, can actually be life-saving ideas. They're the ones that can change the way that you do your business and operate with others. So as you leave here today, I want you to take one of those candies or mints that are a lifesaver and know that your ideas can come in different sizes, different colors, different flavors, different means, and they can still take the organization to another level. I encourage you to continuously think strategically, lead your innovations with passion, and to know that you still, inside of you, each and every one of you, have those life-saving ideas. Thank you.
Depending on the situation of where you're at or what the regulatory framework is, so someone like Uber, right now, they probably started out focusing on maybe the people who wanted their service, so 60%, but maybe now they're focusing on the resistors because of all the bad press and some of the legal challenges they have.
Yes.
How do you determine where to, because I don't think it's one, like there's a blanket
Well, they've got to have two sets of strategies. So you've got one that's dealing with those that want the service, and that's really where their main focus is going to be. But because the resistors are very loud and they're making lots of noise and presenting to be a problem for them to be able to move forward, they have to think about, well, how are we going to deal with that too? So when you're coming up with your ideas, you'll have the bulk, which is your neutral zone, then those are the ones might be impacted by your decisions. You have to come up with a strategy to deal with them and get them on board or in alignment. And then the ones that are resisting, if they're resisting loudly and it's impacting your ability to be able to move forward, then you have to address them too. So my suggestion is always to go out for coffee with them, have a conversation, figure out what are all those things that's causing them to be resistant, and then come up with a plan to address as many of you those that you possibly can. And that way you're showing that you're being collaborative, you're being open, you have thought about it from a systems point of view where you're integrating the interconnected relationships, but you're also wanting to move the idea forward. And the ones that are resisting, generally speaking, do still have ideas in terms of how it could work, but they're poking out some of the holes or the flaws in the logic or in the thinking process that you have to consider as part of your overall strategic plan so that it can be successful and you can attain your vision.
Thank you for coming, and thank you, Siobhan.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.